But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And let's see what we've got going on. How's everybody doing in chat? I'm experimenting with a new lighting setup. And so that's what that is. Full of additional point lights with various LED. Let's see what we've got. We've got all sorts of bullshit. We've got, actually, let's see, we've got Weed Lord, Olympics SDCC, JD Vance's Weird Beast is Cooked. We've got, the horrible Zionist ghouls over at JNS TV talking about the Olympics mockery of Christianity, just to remind us who their Zionism is really for. We've got, the Texan Zionist and Notre Dame truther Carolyn Glick on the murder of Ismail Haniyeh. We've got Xander Hole's origin story. I've never watched this video. I'm kind of curious about it. How I fell down the alt-right pipeline and escaped. It showed up in my recommendations, and since that is sort of the origin of his current grift, I was curious about it. And then we've also got this other one, which I love. This is also Xander Hole, and I love it just because of the number of things that it gets wrong in the title. It is called The ICJ and World Court Demand Israel Stop Their Occupation of Gaza. Okay, first of all, you see, the ICJ is just the official abbreviation for what is colloquially known as the World Court. They are literally the same body. Those aren't two different bodies. The World Court is the ICJ, is the World Court. Also, we looked at that advisory opinion on stream when it came out, and it isn't just about the occupation of Gaza. It is the occupation of all of Palestine. So it's like he managed to get multiple things totally wrong in just the title of this thing, and tens of thousands of people actually care what this jabroni thinks. Hello, Riveroon. Let's see, we've got other stuff here. Oh, we've got the Young Turfs endorsing Israeli propaganda about who did the strike on Majd al-Shams. I mean, literally only Israel claims that it wasn't Israel that did it. Hezbollah says it wasn't them, and when it has happened that they have actually hit somebody that they did not intend to, they do not deny it. They historically always will own up to that and apologize. So the fact that they flatly deny this would seem to suggest that it probably wasn't them, and they had absolutely no reason to attack a bunch of occupied Syrians in the occupied Golan Heights, when those Syrians actually are kind of on side with them. Which were the last two? Oh, and we've also got Darman did a knockoff of Mrs. Doubtfire, apparently. So there's that too. The which two sounded good to you, Riveroon? Was that the Young Turfs and Weed Lord, or was that something else? Oh, I have hundreds. I have literally like 700 videos in this thing, and most of them we haven't actually looked at. I mean, we could, just for the hell of it, look at some of the older stuff. We've got Marvel's new Captain America says American Dream is a lie from PragerU. We've got, I'm just scrolling through the hundreds and hundreds of things I've got here. There is no moral equivalence in the Middle East conflict. That is classically Abby, and it's from 3 years ago, and it's a take that is guaranteed to have aged beautifully. Oh, okay, I'm up for that. Let's do the Xanderhall Origins. Let's start that one out. I mean, like, literally, this is how long it takes me to scroll through my reaction fodder. Part of that is because I'm really bad about taking things out that I've actually looked at on stream. But part of that is also because we look at, like, less than a tenth of what I find. So there's just tons of stuff. Just tons of wild bullshit in here. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay, it's Xanderhall, the origin story. Let's check it out. This is from 4 years ago. Early on in the grift. Xanderhall. The grift begins.
Alright, hello everyone, it's Big Puncher. As those of you who've been around my channel for a while, you may notice that this is a new microphone and my sound quality is way better. This is the Blue Spark S.
It is way better, but it doesn't change the fact that the quality of the content is roughly the same.
XL Blackout Edition. This isn't sponsored or anything, this is just my first time using this new mic and I love it. I also just hit 15,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and as promised, in the coming weeks, I will be doing a stream.
Okay, he has sort of an Urkel thing going on in his voice right now.
Where I read The Conquest of Bread live in its entirety.
Wait, he read a book? Xanderhall read a fucking book. It is demonstrated. There has been absolutely no evidence that he actually learned anything from doing it. Maybe this never happened.
I do have some preparation I have to do, so that'll be somewhere down the line. In the meantime, the day I'm recording this video is pretty close to the 8-month anniversary of me being a bread tuber. If you were around for it, my debut on the site of YouTube was back in April when I released 2 videos telling the story of my political journey. I discussed how I went from being an apolitical liberal teenager to falling down a rabbit hole of hateful far-right content and
to becoming an apolitical liberal teenager in his 20s again, but with a whole lot of followers and a whole new grift.
Social spaces that influenced my political views very heavily, and then of course how I got out of it. However, I have to admit that my original 2 videos were poorly made by my current standards for—
He has standards. Like, I will admit my production values, especially on stream highlight content, aren't always the greatest. I mean, I'm trying to improve on that, but historically, I have just generally kind of slapped an opening sequence on it, and just had done with it. But I've never seen any evidence that he actually edited anything. So was this a time before, like, when he was making an effort on that score too?
For starters, I didn't really take YouTube as seriously back then.
Wait. What? Okay. Riveroon, I take it I have not. Enlighten me. I want to hear the recent stuff about Xanderhall.
So I kind of rushed the script. I didn't include quite a few things that in hindsight were very important and very relevant to my radicalization. I also wasn't even a leftist when I made those videos. I was still identifying—
You're still not, though. Zan's editor. Oh, Demon Mama did show up in my Rex. I started to look at that, and it seemed. Okay, tell me more about this. I mean, I'm not. Let me just say, I'm utterly shocked. I can't imagine that a guy as just so morally pure as Xanderhole would be abusive and manipulative.
Is what I now know to be a neoliberal, so my political views have changed even more since I made those videos. And I think where I am now politically is really relevant to the overall story. I've also learned a lot about YouTube, politics, and radicalization these last 8 months.
I will say the denasalization of his speech was a definite improvement. He's sitting here talking like this the whole time and is really starting to... It's getting on my nerves a little bit. Did I do that?
And when I look back at those 2 videos, I really can't help but cringe. So in light of all this, I decided to essentially remake those 2 older videos and create a remastered version with better audio quality, editing,
a less the director's cut,
rushed script, and a more holistic approach to telling the story. This means that I'm not just going to be telling the story from my point of view, I'll also be interjecting to add context to certain events, describing the political landscape online or in America
okay, so this is going to be a train wreck. I'm already seeing it.
Certain points in the story, as well as adding a few disclaimers about some...
He's saying that he's gonna add analysis, and he should not do that. He is not good at the analysis.
The creators I'll be discussing as well. With all that said, hopefully you enjoy the remastered telling of how I fell down the alt-right rabbit hole and how I got out. To properly tell this story, I need to start with how I was raised before even having access to the internet, because as I now know, there's a lot of real-life factors that make someone susceptible to falling down the rabbit hole. I was raised from the ages of 3 to 10 years old by a single mother. My biological dad and mom never married, and I have no memory of my biological father. I was also a single child. Since I was being raised by a single mother who came from an already not very wealthy family, we didn't have much money growing up. We sometimes moved around the Tampa area from apartment to apartment as the rent got too expensive for us to stay any longer. My mom identified as a liberal and a feminist. She taught me that I should treat everyone equally, no matter their race, sexuality, ethnicity, or gender. She explained to me what racism, sexism, and homophobia were when I was pretty young, and since my mom wasn't religious or anything...
Okay, I mean, pretty cool mommy seems to have.
I was never taught to believe in God or any superstitions. So growing up, even at a very young age, I was pretty socially progressive. In fact, if you asked me, I probably even understood to a degree that rich people were stomping all over poor people like us.
Wow. Like, so what I want to see is the video where he explains how he managed to get okay with rich people stomping all over poor people. Because you don't hear him even acknowledging that sort of thing now.
Who could barely get by. If I remember correctly, I heard the terms liberal and conservative for the first time when watching an episode of American Dad. And my conclusion after the episode was that, yeah, I was a liberal. I wasn't racist, homophobic, sexist, and the show gave the idea that those were things that conservatives were. This was probably my first real interaction with politics, even if I was like 7 years old at the time. Things weren't always perfect between me and my mom. In fact, they were oftentimes bad. Me and my mom fought a lot. She was overly strict, yelled way too much, like over just about anything.
I don't know,
and to
maybe,
this day,
maybe that was... Okay, that could be fucked up. But I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking that listening to him talk all the time would make me yell a whole lot too. I mean, yeah, that could be fucked up, but on the other hand, it's like, I can kind of understand it.
Don't really like her because of it. I know this all seems like way overly personal, but I promise it's all extremely relevant to my radicalization. In 2008, it was time for Bush to leave the presidential office, and this was the first time an election happened, and I was old enough to remember it. The primaries came down to Hillary and Obama. My mom voted for Hillary and my grandmother Obama, and Obama ended up being the Democratic nominee and then the president. My family was pretty happy when Obama was elected, and so was I. He held beliefs I was pretty sure I agreed with, and most of all, he was a black man. I was alive to see America's first ever black president, and this was a big deal. This is a huge historical event. I know this may not seem like much now.
Wow, there was an actual edit cut right there.
But this gave me the idea when I was young that racism and other kinds of bigotry were dying out, going extinct, at least in America. My thought process process was, I mean...
Well, I mean, and when did you decide that it was okay to flog white genocide conspiracy? Because that happened after your de-radicalization, which I find fascinating.
How can a country full of racists and white supremacists elect a black man to lead it? At this point in my life, I just developed the...
That actually reminds me, I was watching the German coverage of the US election at the time. No, it was the Austrian coverage. And one of the commentators remarked, you know, in a country as racist as the US, the fact that Obama won really just shows how desperate people were to get away from Bush.
Assumption that any bigots that are still out there were either in hiding because it's socially unacceptable to be intolerant, or living out in the middle of nowhere playing the banjo and fucking their cousins. I learned about the Holocaust and slavery in school, but they taught me that the Civil War was about states' rights, and that the Nazis had all basically died out after World War II.
Well, I mean, having had long and lucrative careers in the arts, sciences, and government.
Young, naive mind, all these things happened a long time ago, and they didn't really have an impact on the world anymore. When I was...
See, for me, my development in this regard started with this, like, rich-ass, white, like, primary school that I was sent to, where I was, like, the brokest kid there. Which, I mean, was not... we were not doing very well. All the other kids were fucking rich as hell. And the way they taught about racism there was... There was a specific day of the year where we got to talk about racism. And that was Martin Luther King Day. Where they explained that during the racism, there was segregation. And then Martin Luther King very nicely walked up to John F. Kennedy and said, hey, this stuff isn't great. And John F. Kennedy then said, wow, that's fucked up, dude. We gotta do something about that. And that was the end of the racism. And that I mean, that seemed like a bit of a thin narrative even to me when I was like 8. But then we moved, ended up in an overwhelmingly black school in the city center of Cincinnati, or, well, near the city center. And I got to find out, then I got the real shit. That was a serious awakening. But yeah, I mean, it really says a lot about him, because he's from the fucking South. So, I mean, that's how fucking segregated the South is, that he probably, I mean, like, I can tell you in Cincinnati, yeah, you know, 40% black population, and it is entirely possible to go through one's entire life and not see any evidence of it. Like, literally, it is that fucking segregated in Cincinnati. So, yeah, I can buy it.
When I was younger, we didn't have a lot of money, like I said before, but there was one thing I loved to do more than anything, and that was playing video games. I had a variety of consoles my mom or my grandma got for pretty cheap at yard sales or flea markets, and I would play games on a computer when
a variety of consoles? I was using an NES until, like, SNES had been out for a couple of years. And I was late getting to the NES. And my PC couldn't even do, like, VGA graphics. It was a monochrome monitor until the late 90s.
I could, but I never had consistent access to computers or the internet until I was 10 years old when my mom met my stepdad. He's a cool dude, and he holds the same political beliefs as my mom. Nowadays, they're both neoliberal Buttigieg supporters, with maybe Bernie as their second choice. But not long after they started dating, more money was coming in, and after we moved...
Well, which explains a little bit about why neoliberalism would start to appeal.
An actual house, we got internet, and I got an old desktop PC. Finally, I was able to browse the internet at my leisure. Not at a school computer lab or a public library. It didn't take long for me to get way more into YouTube. Before getting my own computer, YouTube was just a website full of cat videos.
Fuck, like, that is so weird to have come to the internet at a time when YouTube was already there. Like, my first experiences with the internet were 11 years before there was YouTube.
And pivot stick figure animations we would watch on the school computers when the teachers weren't looking. But with unfiltered access to it, I discovered the gaming community on YouTube. The idea of just recording yourself playing a game and uploading it...
Here comes the bad shit.
...to YouTube for thousands to see making money from it, it blew my mind. Eventually, I would discover a new game called Minecraft, the first online game I would ever play. When I was asked to make a username, I chose PigPuncher368, since the first thing I did on the free version was
which is, I mean, that's just lovely.
punch a pig, and 368 were the middle 3 digits of my grandmother's phone number, and now you know the origin of my username. At this point, I was only 10 years old, and there wasn't really any politics on YouTube, at least.
Oh wow, holy shit. I really, see, I don't think I was even really aware of YouTube. So many of the people who actually, like, did not already have any kind of real media platform and managed to make it big on YouTube are people who just started around then before YouTube became utterly saturated.
It's not in the communities I hung out in. You see, back then, everyone was trying to grow their channels and potentially create a career for themselves, and this meant that
That's so weird. Like, back then, they were growing their channels and trying to create a career for themselves. We couldn't imagine that now.
being controversial was counterproductive. One of the unofficial rules of being a YouTuber at the time was never talk about politics. Since no one I ever watched expressed their political opinions, and I always had this stereotype in my head that all conservatives were old white dudes out in the country who were never on the internet, I just kind of assumed that all these young YouTubers I was watching were liberals, or at least not racist or homophobic or sexist.
Yeah, okay, I will say... Yeah, it is very easy to fall into that assumption. If you don't actually hear somebody express a belief, I mean, there is really a tendency, I think, unless you are very cautious, to sort of assume that somebody is on side if they seem nice. In fact, that is like how U.S. election campaigns work, where they will avoid the issues like the plague, and the whole thing is around, oh, you know, that guy, I could drink a beer with him.
Sexist. Things continued like this for a while until 2012 when I was on the internet for the first time during a presidential election. The election was between Obama and Romney. Now, most YouTubers kept to the rule of not talking about politics at this time, but some channels I watched did cover the topic.
I will say, I was really, at this time, I really was not. I wasn't even really watching YouTube that much, I don't think, so... Strangely enough, this is a situation where he probably actually is a little bit more aware of... Like, okay, Chad, who else was on YouTube around this time? Like, I don't remember really paying a whole lot of attention to the platform back then.
The election. For example, Epic Rap Battles of History made a video where Obama and Romney have a rap battle and Abraham Lincoln drops in on a giant bald eagle to endorse Obama. Obama was elected
Epic Rap Battles of History does have its...
for his second term, and political talk in these parts of the internet I hung out in kind of ceased. However, as I got more into online gaming and it became more popular, something big happened. What we would now call the boomers escalated their assault on video games. If you're old enough to
What do you think that boomers is a new concept that you guys invented? Like, literally, that term has been around since, well, since the boomers were fucking born. I mean, we're talking, that term has been around for more than half a century.
Remember, the largest figure leading this video games are bad for kids and cause violence crusade was a Florida lawyer by the name of Jack Thompson. Most of the younger people watching probably won't remember him because he's since been disbarred and is totally irrelevant nowadays, but back then, he was the gaming community's biggest enemy. All sorts of YouTubers and even just normal gamers united to tear this guy a new one. They would cite studies that refuted Thompson's claims and would make fun of the mainstream news media for platforming him and their out-of-touch conservative beliefs. All of this cemented my belief that the gaming community is full of a bunch of young people who are smart and progressive and...
Oh, well, of course he tried to, yeah, of course he tried to cozy up to them. Probably cozying up to them now.
Understand that the mainstream media and conservatives are out of touch. We would point out that conservative media would often use violent video games as a scapegoat for school shootings when clearly access to firearms and bad mental health was the real issue.
Well, yeah, not to mention just, like, association with the far right. Well, I mean, it's amazing how little attention, that gets a lot more attention is my feeling that it did. But, like, Kollontai, those guys were fucking fash. They picked Hitler's birthday to do the attack. Their rooms were full of Nazi shit. And that aspect, like, was very briefly touched on in the reporting, and then just never again, practically.
Sadly, even my neoliberal parents fell for this trap and would rant at me about how CSGO is going to turn me into a terrorist. You're probably wondering what any of this has to do with the alt-right rabbit hole, right?
I mean, God, it's too bad it didn't, though. I mean, considering the other option, considering what all this did turn him into...
Well, I promise, it's all relevant to my story, and of many others my age who had the same experience. When Gamergate came around, everything changed. In hindsight, the internet, and especially the gaming community, seemed to take a pretty big turn, and so did I. The internet always had its darker places, and I was always a fan of dark and edgy humor, and still am. But around this time, most popular memes went from this...
Chocolate rain. The school books say it can't be here again.
A song about institutional racism still being prevalent and inescapable, yeah, that's actually what Chocolate Rain is about, I'm not even kidding, to something more resembling this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when when that was the first thing. It was like, they started talking about, oh, we need to start watching, watching people who got bullied, and it's like, as somebody who got bullied, that didn't make me very happy. And then, when I started to actually read more about, like, Kollontai specifically, it was like, those motherfuckers were the ones doing the bullying. Oh yeah, actually thinking about it, Anita Sarkeesian was, like, the first YouTube creator I watched regularly. No se trata de la cámara, sino de la iluminación. Que estoy experimentando un poco con un nuevo formato visual. Así que tengo unas luces acá que se están cambiando de color cada poco rato. Eso es lo que está pasando nomás.
Mrs. Obama, I've done it. I've stopped racism. Thank you, Skipper. Now I am free to roam this earth. Not if I have anything to say about it, and...
What the fuck is this? Like, this audio is terrible.
I do. I'm gonna say the N-word.
Now granted, we weren't quite there yet, but looking back, the comedy on YouTube was definitely taking a turn. Now, when Gamergate came around, I didn't even pay much attention to it. I was one of those people who...
I mean, and I have to wonder with this guy, just how much of this is him sort of downplaying how into, like, far-right shit he was. I mean, on the one hand, he actually, I would say, probably has an interest, since his grift is very much, he's the ex-Nazi who isn't one anymore, and you should pay him money for not being a Nazi anymore. But, so I guess he wouldn't really have a strong stake in downplaying it, but on the other hand, I just kind of have to wonder. When you see some white dude who's like, yeah, I kind of dipped my oar in that, but not really, not seriously. It's like, maybe that's true? Well, honestly, this is better editing than a lot of the subsequent stuff, in that there is editing.
Heard about it and kind of knew what was going on, but I was too busy playing Minecraft to really care. I heard it was about gaming journalists taking bribes from developers to write positive game reviews or something, but then I heard my parents mention it. They'd been watching the news, and the boomers on there said something about it being a misogynistic neckbeard brigade to get women out of the gaming industry.
Which actually is really surprising to hear that it was on the news. I don't think I actually heard about, like, I think I caught, like, the early stages of Gamergate, because I remember when Anita Sarkeesian did that video, it was like, where she started talking about tropes in video games and stuff like that, and I remember, like fashy dudes showing up sometimes in comments where her stuff was posted and saying, oh, she doesn't play any video games, she's a fraud, and stuff like that, and it's like, but I don't think I was really aware of Gamergate until after.
I already believed that the mainstream media hated gaming for whatever reason, and anything they reported about it was probably false and a smear against the gaming community. So when I heard my parents saying these kind of things, I just sort of rolled my eyes and ignored it. So I just sort of went with the idea that Gamergate was about ethics and gaming journalism. This all happened around the same time that I was becoming a teenager, and like most teens, I wanted independence from my parents.
Jesus, Gamergate was happening when he was just becoming a teenager. This explains so much about Xanderhole.
My mom was very strict, and I found myself rebelling against her in whatever ways I could get away with. And I found myself questioning my beliefs since I wanted to be an independent person, not just a carbon copy of my...
It's amazing how much resistance there is to that point. Like, just straight up mathematically speaking. I mean, people are like, well, we have to bring these people in. And it's like, first of all, do we? Do we have to bring them in? I'm kind of fine with them being being out and not in. But the other thing is, it's like, do the fucking sums. If you let them in, how many people do we lose because these spaces become toxic waste dumps? You know... Exactly how many people are we going to bring in compared to all the people who are going to find that these spaces are now completely intolerable?
My parents' beliefs. Around this time, my views of feminism and women started to change as well, for a variety of reasons. For starters, when me and my mom would argue, she would often claim that I was talking back because she's a woman and I don't respect her because of that.
And I can totally believe that Zan's mom was right about that.
This obviously wasn't true, and if...
Obviously? I didn't know about obviously. Maybe it wasn't true, but I hardly consider it obvious.
If it was just that, I would have just rolled my eyes and moved on. But around that time, I was in middle school and trying to find my first girlfriend. Problem is, I wasn't the best looking guy back then.
This is where the comments are supposed to say, "Wow, you certainly are now, Zan," and the whole sort of fake vomit style beard that you've got going on, like you just sort of didn't do the adhesive very well on dyed cotton swabs or something. That's such an amazing look. It's very daring.
And I got rejected by every girl I liked. This led me to browsing some strange corners of the internet for advice on girls. I frequented Yahoo Answers where I would ask questions and advice on how to get a girl, and I would read other answers to people's questions that were similar to mine as well. The consensus in a lot of these answers was that women only like jerks, and nice guys finished last.
And the interesting thing is, he's still being a jerk. Maybe he's decided that one works, he just hasn't done it right?
That infamous slogan that I imagine led many guys to becoming incels. Also, a lot of the TV shows I watched portrayed feminists as being man-hating and violent, such as this scene from an episode of that 70s show where the main character, Eric, goes in to kiss his girlfriend in a park when her hair gets stuck. An awkward scene ensues where he's trying to get the hair unstuck, but he accidentally yanks her hair, making her scream a little. This results in a group of feminist protesters that were nearby mistakenly assuming that he was assaulting her.
Which it's not unreasonable for them to assume, right?
Run up and strip him naked, beat him up.
Well, yeah, not to mention this particular sitcom. If we're going to be talking about, like, misogynist violence, there's a little bit of off-screen stuff to be talking about there.
And write pig in Sharpie on his forehead and send him home naked. Not long after, we get this scene.
Yeah, I'm real proud of him.
Sí, el nombre sí. El weón, otro que dice ser ex-facho, que todavía tiene monetizado todo el contenido facho que hizo. Yeah.
They stole all my clothes. Who? The angry mob of feminists?
Yeah. On top of all this, I didn't really see any apparent reason for feminism to be necessary. As far as I could tell, women had equal rights.
You mean,
they
sort
could
of
vote,
like you still don't see any
work
apparent reason for decolonization to be necessary. What he's just telling us is why, all he's doing is raising questions about why we should actually care about his analysis of anything.
Generally treated the same as men to me. So while I didn't hate feminism and think it was evil or anything yet, At this point, I started to see it as somewhat useless and misguided. I believed the stereotype that feminists were just ball-busting man-haters. However, I still thought that misogyny and sexism were bad, and I was repulsed when I saw an undeniable instance of it in real life or media.
Yeah, undeniable meaning that even he can tell. Which is exactly the problem. He still thinks he's like somehow the barometer for these things. Which is why when somebody says, you know, maybe decolonization should happen, and he says, well, you know, that sounds like white genocide to me. He doesn't think about, wait a second, maybe my perceptions here are a little bit skewed because of the settler position that I'm in. He says, no,